You didn't get played because you were weak. You got played because you were honest. In a world that rewards emotional camouflage. Think about it. You showed up clear, direct. You meant what you said. And somewhere along the way, she smiled, pulled closer, then slowly changed the rules without ever announcing them. One day, you were special. The next day, you were too much. And that moment, that confusion, is where most men lose their power. Because nobody ever taught you this. Before we go deeper, take a breath. This is Female Code Unlocked, where we decode attraction, psychology, and emotional power most people are too afraid to talk about. If you're done being confused, done replaying conversations at 3 a.m., hit subscribe. This channel exists for the man who's ready to see clearly. Now listen closely. Once you understand this about women, you'll never get played again. Not because you become cold, but because you stop being blind. Here's the uncomfortable truth most men miss. Women don't fall for words. They fall for emotional positions. She's not asking, "Does he like me?" She's subconsciously asking, "Where does he place himself in my emotional world?" And this is where things break. You thought consistency would earn security. You thought availability meant reliability. You thought honesty meant safety. But attraction doesn't work on logic. It works on contrast. When you make her the center of your emotional gravity, she doesn't feel chosen. She feels responsible. And responsibility kills desire. You've seen it happen. The more you explain yourself, the more distant she becomes. The more you reassure, the less she invests. The more you chase clarity, the more she hides behind confusion. Not because she's evil, not because she's manipulating you on purpose, but because desire needs tension. And tension disappears when you hand over your emotional leverage too early. Here's the part that stings. She didn't play you. You positioned yourself to be played. You made her the judge of your worth. You waited for her mood to decide your confidence. You let her silence feel louder than your own self-respect. And once a woman senses that your emotional state depends on her reactions, the power silently shifts. That's when she starts pulling back to see what happens. That's when replies slow down. That's when affection becomes inconsistent. Not to punish you, but to test where you stand when certainty is removed. And most men fail right there. They panic, they overtext, they explain, they ask, "Did I do something wrong?" And in doing so, they confirm the very thing that makes attraction collapse, that they've lost their center. Here's the dark psychological truth no one says out loud. A woman doesn't stay attracted to the man who fears losing her. She stays attracted to the man who would still recognize himself without her. That's the difference between being chosen and being used until interest fades. Once you see this, everything changes. You stop chasing reassurance. You stop reacting to every emotional shift. You stop negotiating for consistency. Because you understand something deeper now. Attraction isn't about proving value. It's about protecting your emotional frame. And when you do that, when you remain grounded, calm, and self-directed, that's when the game ends. The moment you stop trying to secure her feelings is the moment her feelings start trying to secure you. This is where the power flips, quietly, almost invisibly. Because when you no longer chase emotional certainty, you become unpredictable in the one way that matters. She can't tell whether she still owns your attention. And attention, when it's no longer guaranteed, becomes valuable again. Most men think the solution is to care less. That's wrong. Caring less makes you empty. What actually works is caring without clinging. There's a subtle difference, and women feel it instantly. Clinging energy says, "Please don't leave." Grounded energy says, "I'm here, but I don't abandon myself." One feels needy, the other feels dangerous. Because when you stop orbiting her emotions, she has to come closer to read you. Think back to the men women never quite forget. Not the nicest, not the richest, but the ones who made them feel something without begging for permission. Those men didn't explain their value. They didn't fight for attention. They didn't ask where they stood. They moved as if they already belonged, with or without her. And that's the part that gets misunderstood. This isn't about playing games. It's about refusing to participate in emotional chaos. When she pulls back, you don't rush forward. When she becomes inconsistent, you don't demand clarity. When she tests boundaries, you don't collapse them to keep her comfortable. You let silence do its job. You let space reveal intention. You let her actions speak louder than her promises. And here's where dark psychology enters. Not manipulation, but awareness. People treat you based on the standards you enforce without words. If you tolerate mixed signals, you'll receive confusion. If you accept breadcrumbs, you'll never get a meal. If you reward inconsistency with attention, inconsistency becomes the pattern. But when you calmly withdraw emotional access from behavior that doesn't meet your standards, something fascinating happens. She notices. Not immediately, not dramatically, but internally. She starts replaying conversations, rereading messages, wondering why the dynamic shifted. Because you didn't get angry, you didn't accuse, you didn't plead, you simply didn't chase. And that absence forces reflection. This is the part most men are afraid of, letting go of control. But control was never the power. Self-respect was. When a woman realizes she can't provoke you into emotional reactions, can't destabilize your confidence, can't access you without consistency, she either rises to meet your frame or fades out. And both outcomes are wins. Because you're no longer auditioning for connection, you're selecting for alignment. That's how you never get played again. Not by becoming cold, but by becoming unshakable. You still feel, you still desire, you still connect. But you don't give emotional authority to someone who hasn't earned it. And here's the final truth most men learn too late. The moment you choose yourself without resentment, without bitterness, without needing her validation, that's when women either fall deeper or reveal they were never meant to stay. And either way, you walk away intact, aware, centered, unplayed, because now you see the code. Here's what separates the man who finally stops getting played from the man who keeps repeating the same lesson with different faces. He stops romanticizing potential. You were never attached to who she was. You were attached to who you believed she could become. If you just stayed patient, understanding, loyal enough. And that illusion is the most dangerous addiction there is. Because potential keeps you investing in someone who hasn't chosen you back. The moment you stop falling in love with what could be and start responding only to what is, your clarity becomes lethal. You no longer argue with reality. You no longer translate mixed signals into hope. You no longer excuse disrespect as confusion or fear. You simply observe. And observation without emotional panic is power. This is where women sense the shift. You're no longer trying to win her. You're no longer proving anything. You're no longer negotiating your worth through effort. You're calm. You're present. But you're no longer predictable. And unpredictability, when it's rooted in self-respect, feels magnetic. Not because she's chasing drama, but because she can't read your emotional dependence anymore. You've removed the leash. At this stage, something inevitable happens. Women who were only there for attention, validation, or convenience slowly disappear. No confrontation, no closure speech, just distance, and women who are emotionally mature, who recognize strength without control, step closer. They feel safer around a man who doesn't need to possess them to feel whole. This is the final unlock. You don't need to expose manipulation. You don't need revenge. You don't need to win. You just need to stop over-giving access to your inner world, because the moment a woman realizes she can't play with your emotions, can't use uncertainty to control you, can't pull you off your center, the game is already over. Either she meets you with consistency, or she removes herself. And both outcomes protect your peace. That's how you never get played again, not by becoming harder, but by becoming clearer. Clear about what you tolerate, clear about your standards, clear about walking away without drama. When you do that, you don't fear losing women anymore, because you finally understand something deeper. The right woman doesn't need you to abandon yourself to stay, and the wrong one reveals herself the moment you refuse to. This isn't dating advice. This is emotional sovereignty, and once you claim it, no one can take it from you again.